There are silences between people that last so long they become their own kind of language. Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel had been speaking that language for decades. Two boys from Queens who had found each other in a school hallway, who had built something together that outlasted almost everything: the marriages, the disagreements, the years of not speaking, the tentative returns, the falling away again. The music remained. The silence between the men remained too. And somewhere in the distance between those two things, Paul Simon had written a song he never finished and never sent and never played for anyone. Not once in 50 years. Until Stephen Colbert asked about it on a Monday night in November. The Late Show that evening had the particular quality of nights that know they matter before they begin. Paul Simon at 82 was smaller than you expected and larger than you expected simultaneously, the physical presence diminished by age, the interior presence undimmed by any of it. He sat in the guest chair with the calm of someone who has made enough music to stop being nervous about anything. And he talked about his career with the dry, precise humor of a man who has been observing himself from a slight distance for 60 years and finds the observation consistently interesting. Stephen was sharp. The conversation moved through the decades, the early years, the split, the reunion tour, the second split, the music that outlasted all of it. The audience was attentive in the way audiences are attentive when someone genuinely important is in the room. And then Stephen asked about art. Not directly, not the question everyone always asked: are you friends, will you tour again, what happened between you? Something more specific. Something he had found in an old interview from 1983, a single offhand line about a song Paul had been working on that he described as not ready yet. In 1983, Stephen said, you mentioned a song you were working on, you said it wasn't ready. I've never heard it mentioned again. Is it still not ready? Paul looked at Stephen with an expression that was very difficult to read. Some things, Paul said carefully, take longer than others. 40 years, Stephen said. Paul smiled, the complicated smile of someone who has been caught holding something they weren't sure they wanted found. Approximately, he said. What's it about? Stephen asked. Paul was quiet for a moment, the particular quiet of someone deciding not whether to answer but how much of the true answer to give. It's about a friendship, he said. A specific friendship, the kind that shapes you so completely that when it breaks you don't know which parts of yourself belonged to you and which parts belonged to the other person. The studio was very still. Art, Stephen said, not a question. Paul looked at him, then nodded once. Subscribe and leave a comment, because what Stephen played in that studio and what Paul Simon did when he heard it stopped everything. I wrote it in 1974, Paul said. Right after we split the first time, I was trying to understand what had happened, what we had done to each other, what I had done. I got about 2/3 of the way through it and then I couldn't finish it. He paused. Every time I tried to finish it, I ended up somewhere I didn't want to be, so I stopped. But you kept it, Stephen said. I kept it, Paul said. Why? Paul considered this with the seriousness the question deserved. Because throwing it away felt like admitting something I wasn't ready to admit, he said, and finishing it felt like closing something I wasn't ready to close. Stephen nodded. He looked at his desk for a moment, then looked up. Paul, he said, I need to tell you something and I need you to trust me. Paul looked at him steadily. That's a significant thing to ask. I know, Stephen said. Will you? A pause, then, all right. Stephen reached under his desk and produced a small device, a speaker, simple and unassuming. He set it on the desk between them. 3 weeks ago, Stephen said, I reached out to Art Garfunkel. The studio went completely silent. Paul Simon's expression did not collapse. It did something more controlled and more revealing than collapsing. It stilled, the way water stills before something moves beneath it. I told him about the song, Stephen continued. The one from 1974. I asked him if he knew about it. What did he say? Paul asked. His voice was careful, each word placed deliberately, the way you place things when your hands are not entirely steady. He said he always suspected there was something, Stephen said. He said there were times over the years when he could tell you were working through something in a song and then the song would disappear. He said he never asked because he didn't know how. Paul was looking at the speaker on the desk. He recorded something for tonight, Stephen said. He doesn't know if you'll want to hear it. He said to tell you that you don't have to, that it's completely your choice." The studio held its breath. Paul Simon looked at the speaker for a long moment, then at Stephen, then back at the speaker. "Play it," he said. Stephen pressed play. Art Garfunkel's voice filled the Ed Sullivan Theater. 82 years old, slightly slower than it once was, but unmistakable, the voice that had harmonized with Paul Simon's for 60 years, the voice that had been part of the sound of a generation. He didn't sing, he simply spoke. He said, "Paul, I've been thinking about what Stephen asked me, about the song, about 1974. I've been thinking about what it must have been like to sit down and try to write your way through what happened between us and not be able to finish it. I know that feeling. I have my own versions of it. Things I started and couldn't finish because finishing them meant arriving somewhere I wasn't ready to arrive. I want to tell you something I haven't said. Not in the interviews, not in the years when we were speaking, not in the years when we weren't. I want to say it now because Stephen asked me to be honest, and because I'm 82 years old and honesty feels more important than it used to. What we made together was the best thing I ever did, not because of the music, though the music was extraordinary, because of what it required of us. To make something that true with another person, you have to be completely open to them. You have to let them all the way in. And that kind of openness is terrifying. And sometimes, when we're terrified, we destroy the thing that's making us feel that way. I think that's what we did, both of us in different ways. I don't know if that song from 1974 is about me, but if it is, finish it, Paul. Whatever it says, whatever you were trying to work out, finish it. Because the things we leave unfinished have a way of finishing us instead. I love you, I should have said that more. I'm saying it now. The recording ended. The studio was completely silent. Paul Simon was crying, not the managed tears of a man who has been on television for 60 years and knows how to handle emotion in public, the real ones, the kind that arrive from a place so deep that 60 years of professional composure is simply not relevant. His shoulders were moving, his hands were in his lap, and they were not still. Stephen did not move from behind his desk. He understood that the moment needed to be exactly what it was: no intervention, no comfort, no arm around the shoulder. Just the space for a man to receive something he had been waiting for without knowing he was waiting. After a long moment, Paul looked up. "When did you record that?" Paul asked. His voice was rough. "Last week," Stephen said. "He recorded it in his apartment. He did it in one take. He said if he did it twice, he'd talk himself out of it." Paul pressed the back of his hand against his eyes, then lowered it. "That's art," he said. The audience laughed, the surprised, warm laugh that lives right next to tears. Paul laughed too. The real laugh, the one that breaks through grief, because grief and laughter have always lived in the same neighborhood. This is the moment that nobody in the studio and nobody watching at home ever saw coming. Stephen reached under his desk again. He produced a guitar, not Paul's own guitar, a simple acoustic borrowed for the night. He set it on the desk. "You said the song was 2/3 finished," Stephen said. "You've had 40 years to think about the last third." Paul looked at the guitar, then at Stephen. "You want me to finish it here," Paul said, "right now?" "Only if you want to," Stephen said, "but Art asked you to finish it, and I think," Stephen paused, "I think you know how it ends. I think you've always known, you just needed a reason to get there." Paul Simon looked at the guitar for a very long time. Then he picked it up. What happened in the next 4 minutes was not a performance. It was something that exists in the space before performance, the raw material of music before music becomes product, before it gets shaped and produced and released into the world. Paul played the 2/3 he had written in 1974, his voice carrying 50 years of everything that had happened since, and then he reached the place where the song had always stopped. And he didn't stop. He went somewhere new. The last third arrived not as something written but as something found, in real time, in front of 390 people, 4 minutes after hearing his oldest friend's voice say the thing that had never been said. The song ended on a single word, a name, sung quietly almost to himself, the way you say someone's name when you're not performing for anyone and you just need to say it. The studio was silent for a long moment after the last chord faded. Then the audience rose. The song was released 6 months later. The title was simply the word Paul had sung at the end, the name that had been the missing piece for 50 years. Art Garfunkel heard it for the first time when it was played on the radio. His daughter, who was with him, said he sat completely still for the entire song. When it ended, he asked her to play it again. She played it 4 times. On the fifth time, he sang along, quietly to himself in the kitchen of his apartment, the harmony arriving instinctively after 60 years, the way some things, no matter how long the silence has been, come back when the music starts. Some silences last so long they become their own language, and some songs take 50 years to find their last word. But when they find it, you always know. If this story moved you, like this video and subscribe, because some friendships write the music that outlives everything, even the silence.